always noticed about it, because it was so odd. You would drive by and it would catch my eyes because there was a home sitting there, but they never had a yard, ever. It was like it never grew grass. The home would be sitting kind of in the back. It's right there at that main road. It was kind of a nice location, but it never had grass. And maybe sometimes it had little tidbits of green, I'm not sure. But I just remember driving by, and the reason it caught my attention is it was so barren. It was so odd, because you would see this house sitting there, and then eventually I think it may have come for sale. And then eventually I think the home was removed, because if you drive by it now, there's no home on it. And that's been for years. Just if you occasioned up and down the mountain, you would drive by there. But oddly enough, Rhonda Ray and I, we love to go to a grocery store in Wilkes, and we like to go to Wilkes on occasion too, but especially for this grocery store. We were driving by, and I think I mentioned this yesterday. I don't know if she remembers. Oddly enough, it seems like now it may have some green on it. But for so long, it looked so barren and just so plain. It was just like dirt and a house or a home sitting on it. And I started thinking about that spot was barren, and empty and just so brown for so long that I really thought about that as an analogy for growth. We were thinking as I would drive by that lot. I do remember just for years driving by that same spot. And once you notice something, you kind of look when you drive by it. So every once in a while, I think if I were going that way, I would look. And there it sat. Do any of you know where I'm talking about? There was this one little spot as you go down 16. It's on the right. Now there's a huge for sale sign in it, but it does look a little greener now. I think it actually had some green on it. But for so long, in the back of the property, which you could clearly see from the road, there was a double wide. And brown to the road. It was so barren. It was so empty looking. I remember thinking, can't they grow grass there? Because that you would think hurt the sale. If people are driving by and looking, they're thinking, oh, what's wrong with the soil? Why can't it grow anything? And so I was thinking about that. What causes grass to not grow in some areas, but it does others? Because if you look at that photo, what seems to be wrong around the land? Nothing. I mean, there's tree greenery. And now I do think there might be a little bit of green on that property. I'm not sure. Maybe the people weren't working too hard to put green in it. I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to mow a yard like me. It didn't seem, what causes some grass to grow in some areas, but it doesn't others. In this particular spot, it didn't seem like everything around it was too awfully dry and barren. But man, that little spot just seemed like dirt, maybe some sprigs of stuff for years. Again, unless I just didn't notice. So what made that patch of land not grow? So I did a little asking, and I got some examples of what will cause, literally, grass to not grow on land, and I'm using one of them in particular as an analogy. So compacted soil, years of vehicles and foot traffic, construction, all that heavy machinery driving across land. I don't know that I knew this at all about land. Even a home's installation can compress the soil until roots have difficulty penetrating it. Well, that makes sense when you think about it. Something really hard and compacted, like the brown sugar Rhonda got on an online order. She couldn't even beat it against the counter to loosen it. That stuff is like bricks. So she's going to return it, but it's so funny. You ain't gonna get nothing to go down in that unless you like hammer it. Well, maybe not that dramatic, but it's terrible. But compacted land can cause it to have difficulty to go through. And that's the one that, Lord willing, I'll focus on, but just some others for real quick hearing about its sake. Poor soil. The ground may have very little topsoil or organic matter on top. And I wondered about that spot, not necessarily that specific, but for years it seemed like, what is wrong with that little spot of land? Why is it not showing any growth? You can scatter grass seed on it, but there's not much for the roots to grow in. Too much shade. The home or the trees or surrounding vegetation can prevent enough sunlight from reaching the ground. Poor drainage or too much dryness, too little or too much of something can cause it to not grow. Either way, either water sitting in the soil or water running away too quickly can make it difficult for grass to establish. Chemical or physical disturbance, construction debris, Gravel, fill dirt, petroleum can make the soil hostile to plants. Constant disturbance. So I may go through some of these over the course of time, Lord willing. But these are some things that literally cause grass difficulty to grow. Even if grass begins to sprout, repeated traffic or other disturbance can prevent it from getting established, and simply neglect. Sometimes there's nothing dramatically wrong with the land. Nobody ever prepared it, and maybe that was the case. I don't know. Nobody seeded it or watered it appropriately. Nobody gave it an opportunity to establish. So it's so fascinating that you can have two pieces of ground. They can receive the same rain and maybe even the same sunlight. But one becomes lush and the other remains barren. There's something causing it. There's an underlying, pardon the pun, root cause for why the situation is either dramatically good in one and seems so barren and lacking in another. And this parable is going to be nothing new. The parable of the sower in Matthew 13 and 3-8. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And as you read through there, he talks about the different types of ground and receiving of the seed. Some fell by the wayside, fowls came and devoured it. Some fell on stony places. There wasn't enough earth, and they sprung up, but there was no depth to it to keep it growing and flourishing. When the sun was up, it became scorched because there was no root. Some fell among thorns. Thorns sprung up and they choke out the good, but others will fall into good ground and they bring forth fruit. It multiplies. It's not barren. It might become lush. And so the thing that's interesting when you read in Matthew 13, and I just went through it, that's a very common scripture. The problem wasn't the seed. What was the problem? The ground. And that's interesting. In those various scenarios, the same seed may have been distributed, but the problem was with the ground. So I want to focus on the concept of compacted soil. Thinking about that soil that may have been run over by construction, may have been constantly trafficked by vehicles, and it's so hard and compact. Compacted soil was an example of soil that would not grow seed very well. And you think about, to me, this became, I think, in analogies often. Some people think in different ways. I was talking to somebody. This guy sat beside me at convocation. They it's sort of funny. They've started something new in the past several years. If you're at a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, they seat you in a special section. Well, I was near the front because I was so far ahead. I'm at that stage now. And so it was kind of exciting. But I was near the front because I was the next to last line of people for experience. And so the guy sitting beside me, we were talking, and he was, I cannot remember who he named, but there are people who, like, no matter what song comes on, it's like they know the lyrics. Some people think that way. Some people, that helps them remember. That helps them, that is something that is kind of natural for them. Well, mine isn't. I don't even know that I could tell you all the words to Amazing Grace. I don't say that to any shame. I don't even know how to explain it. I cannot always internalize those things. Once someone's singing something, I might have them spring to memory, and they might come back in. Doesn't matter that I've heard it my whole life. I don't know that I think in song, obviously, you know what I mean? But I do think in analogies. If I can make a comparison and a connection, then often that is how I remember. So as I drive by that little lot, now some things can be put to song, and certainly there are little tricks and ways. That's often what people will use to help kids remember stuff. But you think about that as an analogy of that compacted soil. It's gotten really hard and compressed. People can be like that too. Life can pound on a person until they become, if not careful, they become spiritually resistant. The devil has just tried to beat them to death to become compacted soil in terms of their heart. They've gotten hardened. They become spiritually resistant. They experience hurt. That hurt has made them want to be resistant and hardened to anything taking root, any kind of potential growth from happening, because the devil wants them to nurture the hurt instead of loosening that soil up, instead of loosening up the situation and understanding that it's time to move on or move forward. Disappointment can pound on people. Some people can be pounded by disappointment. And if not careful, disappointment, once it pounds on you, There's a physical, literal aspect in your body when that happens. Emotional disappointment can lead to physical problems. Emotional disappointment can lead to stress, and stress has a very negative effect on the body. There was a scenario years ago, it's kind of cute. This lady came to school and had 2 children born around the same time. One was her birth child, one was the child they'd been in the process of adopting from China for some time. But guess what happened when they started the process of adoption? Apparently, physiologically to a woman, there was a less stress. She knew she was getting her child. Guess what happened? She wasn't stressed no more about getting her baby. So guess what happened? She got pregnant. They say, I don't obviously know, I'm not a woman, and I ain't never going to be pregnant. But apparently there is a physiological aspect to stress that can compact somebody so hard. Now there's obviously physical things as well, but this is a true story. She came to school. She had her birth. They were in the same grade. They were twins. They were her twins. It was so cute. One was from China. One was her, because she got pregnant in the process of adoption, because that stress apparently was gone on her body. But disappointment can pound people. And if not careful, they become resistant to growth. We can let it damage our soil, the soil of our heart. Pride. People can be so prideful that they've let it make them become spiritually resistant. It's hardened their heart. They've become cynical. They become cynical to situations. They've let hurt or disappointment, maybe they develop pride as a result, and they develop a cynicism. If you've ever met someone who's cynical because they've experienced disappointment in their lives, whether it doesn't necessarily have to be church, it can be at a workplace. People become very cynical and they have nothing positive to ever say or feel about something because they've allowed that to harden their situation. Unforgiveness, the inability to move forward, the inability to let something go can harden somebody's. If you think of the heart as the soil, the person's inward spirit is their soil. Unforgiveness will harden somebody. Nothing can grow in that. It would be impossible for them to move forward until they can find forgiveness. Or simply repeated resistance to God's correction can make somebody's heart hard. They don't want to accept they're wrong. When someone cannot accept the fact they need to change, that they're just wrong, that they're really not in a healthy situation or a healthy spot, it hardens them. Because they're so focused on trying to make what they want to be correct or the way they feel about it to be correct, they become resistant to the fact that they really need to change, that they need to find a difference in their life, and that hardens. Hardened, compacted soil is not conducive to growth. There's no way for the root to take hold and for the growth to be produced. It was preached in camp meeting. A lot of us were there. I hope you remember hearing it. Do you remember Brother Dishman? I can't remember what night, but I think a lot of us were there. People become gospel hardened. They become a compacted soil. They've heard these things their whole life. And I think about that. I had actually, before I heard it phrased that way, I really liked that phrase. It's a terrible situation, but it's a really good way to put it. They become gospel hardened. Have you ever watched a kid who's used to getting in trouble and they sit and they're being lectured? And if you ever watch their face, guess what they're not doing? They ain't listening. They're enduring. And they even know when to say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. But they ain't going to change. They turn right around and they're going to be that little booger they always were, because they ain't no fool. They know the same routine. I did this. I'm going to catch it. There are kids who will endure the punishment for the pleasure they got from their mischievousness. It's bad, not a good way to approach life. It's not going to become it's not a good adult behavior to keep with you. But man, they'll do it. And they know exactly what to say, exactly when to say it, because they've become hardened to the punishment. It's not producing an effect. It isn't producing a change in the child. That ain't going to change them one bit. But they know what to do to get the adult to shut up. At least to shut up for that moment. And then they go about their business. That's just the nature of children. For many kids. And then they'll go about their business. And it didn't make one single lasting impact. But what a terrible thing to think that people would become that way with the gospel. I've heard this my whole life. I've always been taught this. I've always heard this. And you know what? It's making no change. And I thought the brother, in a very, very compassionate way, tried to portray to people, please don't let yourself get into this scary condition. Because they've hardened their soil. God, at some point, what if you're considered soil that's not worth the time? Soil that can't be tended, soil that won't be worked with. A person cannot grow if he or she is resistant to that which will produce growth. You cannot grow. People who have heard the seed cast forth, the seed, if you think of it as the word, they've heard it cast forth for years and years and years and years. But for all those years, it falls on their hardened hearts. If not careful, it does not take root because they don't allow it. They're not allowing the soil to be tended because they've become hardened. And that to me is so scary, to think that someone, God forbid it would be me. I mean, I ain't putting it on nobody else. I don't want to become hardened in that way. In Hebrews 3, and 7 through 19, if I can skim through that pretty quickly. Wherefore, as the Holy Ghost saith, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. There is even admonition in God's word to be very cautious of that condition. Compacted, hardened soil doesn't grow as well. Potentially may not grow at all. Because how's it going to take root if it's just laying on the top of the surface, right? A bird can come by and eat it. Whatever the case is, it can just wither in the sun. Today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness, when your fathers tempted me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Wherefore I was grieved with that generation and said, they do always err in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So I swear in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief and departing from the living God. Thinking about people who could become gospel hardened. The soil is not tendable because they don't allow it, because they're resistant. But instead, what are we told to do? Exhort one another daily. It takes encouragement from each other sometimes to help our soil remain tendable, if that, however you say that, to be tended to. While it's called today, lest any of you be hardened, lest we be hardened. The exhortation of each other can keep us from becoming hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Now, it specifically says that there, but there's a lot of things that can cause someone to be hardened. Bad experiences at church. I know I'm specifically saying church because we're in church. I mean, it can be anywhere, though. Bad experiences with other people can harden people. It hardens their soil. They don't want anything to do with something. For we are made partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. While it is said today, if you will hear his voice, what does it encourage us to not do? Harden not your hearts. But that goes for me as well. I don't want to become gospel hardened in a different sense. Oh, I've got this. Well, I might have something new. There might be something new for me, a new understanding, a new enlightenment. Because I think once people completely cut themselves off from the fact that God can show them something new, I don't care what stage in your experience you are, you have hardened your heart. You have said, I have attained, I understand this, this is it. Well, what if God shows me something differently? What if he has a way for me to improve? I don't want to say to myself, I have attained, because I haven't. But it just says don't take away from God's word. What does it say equally? Don't add to. So, if there are things that can make me become better, and God can say, hey, I want to work with you on this, then I don't want to harden my heart. For some, when they had heard, did provoke, howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses, but with whom he was grieved 40 years, was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? I'll skip down. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Hardened hearts can lead to unbelief. You think about situations where people can, I say this with caution because I'm not trying to be critical, but people can sit in a service where it is very evident the minister cared. People are in a prayerful mind of spirit and make absolutely no move. Maybe they're touched in their heart, but they just don't want to get there. And you pray they get there. But the scary part is, what if they're hardened ground that has become so hardened they cannot effectively grow seed? God's word cannot be properly implanted in their heart because they are not going to allow it. A hardened heart cannot effectively also grow spiritually. Compacted soil, you don't want a compacted soil, I guess, can be caused by several things. And I'm going to repeat them. The years of vehicles running over it, foot traffic, construction, a home being set up from all the machinery and installation process, construction, and it can all compress it. the soil until roots have difficulty penetrating. There's something causing someone difficulty for God's word to penetrate. People can become hardened based upon, sadly, how they are treated. How we treat someone can add to the compression if not careful. It might help loosen the soil. Think about that. What if the approach is, God help me to be in interaction with somebody that'll help them break up some of that ground a little bit, to make it tendable, something that can be tended to. But if not careful, we compress it further. Some people in the nature of, I think, good intentions can say very harsh things to people, thinking, well, I'm just going to tell them they need to be this, pressing them down further. And if not careful, I think it makes people more gospel hardened. Because what does the devil do in that moment where God may want to tender their heart? He brings back to mind, well, brother and sister and so. And I know it's not fair necessarily, but we choose how we approach people. We choose what can be brought back to someone's mind. Years of feeling trampled on, people can become hardened. Years of feeling beat down, people become hardened. Years of feeling discouraged, years of feeling criticized. And if not careful, other people add to the hardening process of some people's hearts. And I'm not placing blame on other people. Don't misinterpret, because we're responsible for ourselves. But we all have a part to play, don't we? And this is what I thought about for myself as I reflected doing this lesson. I don't wish to be the reason someone feels trampled by truth. I mean, setting your home up is necessary, isn't it? If someone bought a manufactured home, a modular or whatever, Sedgwick, whatever those things, whatever category of home, or even a stick build, are they going to bring in machinery on your land to set it up? Yeah, it's going to get trampled. But at some point, you want it to still become something that you can tend to make a yard with, most likely. Well, I don't want to be the reason that truth is used in a way that someone feels trampled upon. God expects us to represent that which is right, and we have to. But I believe God in his great wisdom can give us understanding of balance when it comes to working with other people. If you don't have something in balance, either direction it falls, it's not good. Just like ground can get beat down and beat down due to foot traffic, someone's heart can get beat down because they feel browbeaten and attacked. Maybe in the name of good intention, somebody speaks to a brother or sister, but God, I do pray that people will be very cautious of the words they use. Because if not careful, someone who's already beaten down can be beaten down further. Now, I know it still falls upon them what they do with it. And I don't want to say, I'm not saying people aren't accountable for themselves, because they are. However, I don't want to cause someone feel that way. I want to help someone else grow, not add to their hindrances based on the way I interact. The verse from Hebrews, and I like this. What does it admonish us to do? Exhort one another daily. And the purpose of that is so that someone doesn't become hardened. People who work with the ground and the soil, they're going to work with it pretty often, right? To encourage growth. You don't say that phrase necessarily, but when you're out there working in a garden, weeding it, tending it, when you're out there in your yard, weeding it, tending it, mowing it, whatever you do with it, you're doing it to encourage growth. That's the whole point. Well, shouldn't that be the point of what it means to serve the Lord? Our words can have the power to encourage or discourage. To exhort can refer to encouraging someone to keep on going and don't give up. Rhonda Ray, but our words have power. Rhonda Ray and I were in the car yesterday. I'm pretty sure it was yesterday. And a friend of mine sent this list. I saw her at one of the beginning of school work days. And it means something to somebody sometimes, I guess. And I said, well, you look like you've lost some weight. And she just smiled. I think she's just thankful someone recognized. And she said she was doing something our insurance offered. And so she sent me the list. So Rhonda Ray and I had this. And we were talking about some of the items. And Rhonda Ray looked at me and was like, what's wrong with Albuquerque tuna? Albuquerque tuna. And I didn't say anything. I turned my head, and she knew I was trying not to get tickled. Albacore tuna, it's the chunk white albacore, but for some reason she looked at me and said, "What's wrong with Albuquerque tuna?" And so it struck me funny. She just said that, but we had a good little chuckle because her words had the ability to uplift my spirit. But words and actions can do the opposite too if we're not careful. Words can make compacted soil even more compacted. When the devil tempts me to look at someone and analyze why I feel this person is or is not growing like you might think they should, then maybe I need to take a moment for me. This is my reflection on the lesson. And I stop and I look inward and I ask myself this question. Am I being the example I need to be to encourage them to grow? You know, it's very easy to get frustrated. I mean, I've driven by that same little plot of land for years, off and on through the years. What did I constantly notice about it? It looked dead. It just looked barren. Now, I never stopped and pondered. I wasn't going to stop and knock on the house. Dude, what's wrong with your yard? That's none of my business. I'm not going to do that. But when I think about dealing with people, you might look at something and it seems so barren. It seems like potential wasted. And it's easy to become frustrated, obviously. But sometimes it's good to ask myself, am I being the example I need to be to encourage someone to grow? Am I, because that's what I have power over. That's what I have power to control and to truly change. Am I being the Christian I need to be to help someone else see that living for the Lord is the best life? Easier to be frustrated as someone else, but sometimes self-reflection is where I need to take my brain. In 2 Corinthians 3:2, ye are our epistle written in our hearts, known and read of all men. Our lives are letters that other people are reading every possible day. Our life is a letter they read. And as I drove by that spot on Highway 16 for years, what did I constantly notice? That it was dead, that it was barren, that it looked so dull and dry. And like I would think, man, those poor people, they can't get a yard, can they? Now, maybe they weren't trying, I don't know. But I noticed that it stayed in the same condition time after time after time. And this is where I thought for myself, is this what people would notice about me? What does someone say about me after years of drive-bys, experiences, interactions? What does someone say about me? Do I seem to grow and learn from my failures? Do I exhibit growth from understanding what God has tried to show me through the years? Because God forbid, I do not wish to appear like that barren piece of land. Nothing changing, nothing improving, nothing different. Just more of the same. God forbid, more of same bad habits, more of same bad choices, more of same, just compacting the soul. Now, I might be saying that I live for the Lord, but if not careful, I can't let my soul become compacted in another way either, my soil, that I can't make room for change, make room for growth. Someone might even wonder in that situation, just like with that yard. I don't know. Did they try? Did they try to grow a yard? I have no idea. Maybe they did. But someone could ask that about me. God forbid. Is Danny even trying? Because there's a seriousness to reflecting on those questions, I feel like, and those ideas, because people are reading our lives like a letter, a quote unquote. We are a letter that is written. What would you do if you started reading a letter and it starts to discourage you and make you feel down and out? I mean, if you got a letter and you're like, oh, this is wearing me out. This is weighing me down. What can you do? I get to say it. Stop reading it. What's the purpose of continuing? Just stop. Stop reading it. Why would you continue reading something that's bringing you down? Why would you continue reading something that brings a discouragement to your life? Why read a quote-unquote letter, meaning the letter of someone's life, that doesn't inspire hope and change in your own? If not careful, you start to discount it. What does reading the letter of my life? That's the question for myself, my self-reflection. What does someone reading the letter of my life, what does that cause in others? I get so tickled at one of my great nieces. She's really sweet about me and Rhonda Ray. But she's always adds this little caveat and I giggle. She's really sweet, and it means a lot to me that she says I'm paraphrasing in my own words, that she likes to watch our relationship. Now that means a lot to me. But she doesn't fail often to add, but I don't want to be as old as you were. It's cute. I don't care. It's funny. We laugh about it. But what do others read in the letter of our life? What is it causing others? And I don't say that braggartly. That's just a family situation. My sweet great niece, who I'm super tight with. We want to read a letter that's inspiring. You want to read a letter that demonstrates, and when I say letter, quote unquote, the letter of someone's life that demonstrates evidence of a better way. I watch this lady, and she doesn't really know, but I pay attention to her a little bit. I had a conversation with this sister in Ohio once, very brief conversation, but I have actually learned that a commonality, she's lost a sibling. Now, this person has also lost other prominent people in her life. But what do I notice about the letter of her life? She has joy. She continues in service. She is thankful. This lady has a thankful spirit. I have never, ever encountered this woman and she felt like, pity me. Oh, I can't help it. Look, why is this happening? And maybe she feels that on her own and she shares that with people that it's appropriate to share too. But as someone else reading her letter, I find it quite inspiring. We want people to see someone who has peace when circumstances aren't peaceful, kindness when others aren't kind, forgiveness when people have been done wrong, faithfulness when quitting would have been easier, and joy that doesn't seem to depend upon circumstances. And eventually, someone may pause while reading that letter and ask themselves, what's different about this person? And isn't that the goal? To let them see a difference. There is hope that the person will, quote unquote, keep reading this letter or this life. And the person will keep watching the individual and learn more about why they have growth when others around them don't seem to. Just like a piece of land can seem barren, but others around it seem to be growing. It's a chance to demonstrate the life-changing power of Jesus, that it contributes to somebody's life. Our lives should be an exhortation to the people watching us, an encouragement to keep on, an encouragement to continue, an encouragement to say that you can have growth. Don't become hardened. We may not be in the situation where, as the minister spoke about, gospel hardened, but I can become hardened in other ways. I can become resistant to thinking that some things can never be different. I can be resistant to thinking that some things about me could ever change, but I don't want to be that way. I want to be open to the ground that God would tend in my own heart and let growth happen. If I'm not feeling that way, if my life is not an exhortation to other people, encouraging them to believe in this Jesus, I need to do some serious reflection. People need the evidence that my heart is, quote unquote, good ground. And they get that from reading the letter, right? Quote unquote, reading the letter, to see if there's growth. I drove by that one land for years and I noticed that it was barren. And it looks pretty barren if I was able to get the right image. I think I might have been able to, but don't hold me to it. But in the image that I shared, you see some barren land. Even though I did notice maybe a little bit of sprigs of growth, seemed like it was pretty green looking recently. Well, if that's true, that means there's hope. If growth begins, it means there's some hope. It's easy to view someone as a barren waste of time, isn't it? It's easy to look at some situations and think of them as a barren waste of time. But what if we just need to keep trying? I drove by that lot for years, and I'm not sure I ever saw much of anything green. But it seems like yesterday, I think I commented to you that I was like, wow, that looks like it's actually got some growth now. I noticed when there was a change. That to me represents hope. Keep sowing. With some people, you just have to keep sowing. Barren land doesn't become a lush lawn overnight, but it does begin with a few little sprigs of hope, a few little sprigs of growth, a few little sprigs of grass that finally show up. And the same is true with burgeoning growth of a person and their spirituality. Spiritual growth is not always dramatic. I think if all of us are being honest, we've all had small steps that felt dramatic to us, but they wouldn't have looked too dramatic to somebody else watching. But for us, they were a big deal. Sometimes it just may mean that you become a little more patient, saying, okay, Lord, you've got this. In your time, things will be fine. I have shared very openly that for years I prayed about spouse and companionship, but I knew one thing. If anybody would screw it up, it would be me. If I took too much into my own hands, I just knew me. I'm an overthinker. I can overanalyze. You get to a point where if you're not careful, you're older and lonely, I should say. And you can take things into your own hands. And then you just want it to be fixed because you have a desire. Desires can be met, but they're best met in God's timing. Is anyone here that knew me for most of my life? There's a little handful, just a little handful of you who've known me for a long time. Are any of you disappointed I waited for Rhonda Ray? Not to make it awkward for her. No, my family, the children in my family that just have fallen in love with her. Absolutely not. And when the one teases me about being older, I'm like, well, are you glad I waited? Oh, yeah. Something like that. They'll do something probably pretty similar. But things in his time. Spiritual growth doesn't have to be dramatic, and sometimes it's not a dramatic event that happens right away. And I just use me openly because I can. Sometimes it means waiting something out, forgiving someone when you previously couldn't, developing a hunger for Scripture when maybe before it's been lacking, becoming less concerned with recognition, resisting a temptation that previously controlled you, becoming more compassionate, praying when you'd normally panic, noticing sin or the potential for temptation more quickly. That's growth. That can help you avoid some hurt. Becoming more willing to obey God when obedience actually will cost you something. And knowing when to and when not to involve yourself in a situation. That comes with, I think, also age and maturity. When to say, well, this isn't my issue. God help me to step away. Growth has to begin somewhere, doesn't it? It starts somewhere, and look for that. Just like the land on Highway 16, if that's what I saw yesterday, and I don't remember it being that way always, here's what we can infer. Something changed. Something changed. People can change their lives and their conditions, and as a result, they experience growth. We hope in the spiritual aspect. Does reading the letter of my life encourage them that there is a reason to hope, that there is a reason to continue, that there's a reason to even believe? Because if my letter is not providing that to people, I've got my own things to work on, don't I? I've got my own areas to strengthen. Some people also have to change their environment. Those of you who have owned any amount of property, does every little spot on your property necessarily be the best place for a garden? No. So if a spot's not good for a garden, what's that mean you do the next time? If you're willing to grow and learn, you plant somewhere differently. You find where growth will happen. You find where growth can be inspired and it can occur, or you're wasting your time trying to cultivate a section that has proven itself not conducive. It's too rocky, it's too this, it's too whatever. And if you spend all your time and energy, well, I'm going to make that work. Well, you got a little bit of an ego issue you need to work on. You ain't going to make nothing happen with that attitude. Sometimes you got to accept the reality of a situation, don't you? That's not working. But where will it work? And I think as an individual, especially with age, that can come a little easier sometimes to recognize where is my sphere of control and influence and where is it not. That can still earn the recognition of my prayer, but I'm okay if it doesn't have to involve me. Some people have to change their environments to really get the growth that they need. Some people may have had scenarios and situations in their life where they feel like now this is not healthy for me. And they're not excluding people to be rude. They're not excluding people to be uppity, but they just care more about their spiritual growth than they cared about a human relationship. And you can approach those with an attitude that doesn't have to cause immediate hurt and damage. God will give wisdom if we allow him to guard our tongue. I pray that I keep myself in an environment that is spiritually, emotionally, and mentally healthy for myself, because they all play off of each other. If the devil can't work on you he knows you're not, quote unquote, gospel hardened, often where will he work on you? Your emotions, your mental state, your mental health in particular. I realize as I age, and this is for me, I want my spiritual health to really be a focus of my attention. There's a time in your life where there are many things that take your attention. For me, when I got that little thing that said 25 years, and when you see it on paper, that's a little real. This is my 26th, but I have 25 years with the system, the school system. So that's what my thing said, 25 years. It's my 26th right now, Lord willing, if I make it. But when you see that on paper, whoa, that's real. Especially when your friends are retiring and when the art teacher retires this year, I will be the person there who's been there the longest in the building. There are people in the building that I may have been there longer than they've been alive, or is at least as long as they've been alive. And that's a little freaky when you encounter people and you put that in perspective. But my point is, there was a span of time in your life where you're working on that part of your life. You really want to, you choose, is this the course for my life? Is this where I'm going to, is this what I want to do? And you end up sticking with it. And now I'm at a different stage of life where I look at what might God, if he allows it, what might be next, as if I get to end this stage of my life and my career. And the priorities change. For mine in particular, spiritual health should always be a priority. But when you're at a different stage of life, you recognize spiritual, mental, and emotional health, they matter. They matter a lot. And you really want that to be the case where there is growth inspired and a growth occurring. I do not want to be, and this is for me, I don't want to be a dead letter. I don't want to be a dead letter that others stop reading because it's not encouraging to continue reading the course of my life. So you pray, God, help me. I didn't really get to the other reasons that were listed about why growth is not produced on land, but Lord willing, if I continue in this vein, that's how he leads, then maybe we will. We'll give it to Brother Mark.
Thank the Lord. That's a really good lesson. Some good things for us to pick up on and add to her life or improve upon it. I was thinking of that soul conditioning. I was thinking of our soul, having that conditioning. It takes a lot to live for the Lord. It takes some effort and some work. I was thinking about my dad. As far as a garden, he could take a spot about from the middle of this podium to right there up in here and raise more in that garden than most people could in a huge garden, because he took really good care of it. He conditioned it. He worked at it and kept it going. I mean, I've been by his house many a time, and he'd send us bags of stuff home with me, just flourishing because he took care of it. And that's the way our soul is. It needs that kind of attention. Very good lesson. We'll take a little bit of a break, and then we'll move on with the service shortly, Lord willing.